Hello and welcome to the Code Maven live meeting. And if you're listening to the podcast, then it's supposed to be the Rustacean station. If everything goes well, then this conversation is going to be uploaded there as well. My name is Gabor Sabo. I usually help companies with Rust and Python. And in this series of meetings and conversations, I'll try to discuss with guests how the title is Rust at Work. So I'm trying to understand how people use Rust at work and what are the considerations, what are the advantages, maybe disadvantages, and so on. And this time, the first guest is Reichman from Flarion. Hi, Ran.
Hello, it's great to be
Uh,
here.
Thank you for accepting the invitation. And let's get started. I think the first thing should be is that you introduce yourself. We actually never met, so it's going to be a first for me as well to hear about
Okay,
it.
excellent. Yeah, so thanks again for having me here. Excited for this chat. I'm Ron Reichman, co-founder and CEO at Flarion. And what we do at Flarion is we're a data processing company, building solutions to accelerate and make data processing much more efficient, especially at large scale of big data, which means usually like terabytes, tens of terabytes, hundreds of terabytes. But we support a wide range of workloads. And yeah, we're definitely a Rust shop, and lots to talk about in terms of why Rust, how we use Rust, etc.
Mhm. Can you tell a little bit about your background? I mean, this is a startup company, right? How
Yep,
long,
yep.
how long is the company, and what did you before, and how did you get there? That's sort of the.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm born and raised in Israel, and in the army I was in the Talpiot program, which has recently become more famous thanks to the Wiz founders that are also graduates. I spent about 8 years in various intelligence units, low-level development, stuff like that. Then went on to work on a news startup briefly, and then spent about 4.5 years in the United States working on autonomous vehicles and on cloud infrastructure. So I had a chance to work at Roblox, which has data at a very significant scale, and before that at Embark Trucks. And for the past 2 years or so, I've been working on what is now Flarion.
Okay, so it's Flarion is 2 years, and when did you start using Rust, or where did you get to start? Yeah, with Rust. Was it in Flarion, or already you started to use Rust earlier?
So I'm my background is C++. I have a ton of experience with C++, and when I started building Flarion, I knew that I was interested in using Rust because primarily, I mean, there are several reasons that we can go into, but that's when I started going.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in why did you start? Why did you think that Rust is good for this company? And this is a startup company. So one of the things that I hear sometimes that it's not maybe not such a good language for startups.
Yeah, so I would disagree. I think it's a good language for startups. I'd say three main reasons that we're using Spark, that we're using Rust here at Flarion. The first is we're connecting to existing data infrastructure for our customers, and our customers have very high expectations in terms of reliability. So it's a quite a significant advantage, the fact that we don't really have to worry about memory corruption, and everything that entails. So that was one thing. The second is there's quite a lot of interesting infrastructure today in the Rust world. There's also a lot of great stuff in C++, but things like Polars, like data fusion, um, These are open source projects that we were happy to plug into and integrate with. And the third, which is an interesting one, is that we kind of like the people who are into Rust. So what we do at Flarion is kind of it requires a lot of out of the box thinking. It requires trying out new systems, new ideas, and oftentimes the kinds of people that are interested in working in Rust are also the kinds of people that we want to have at Flarion. So those were the three main reasons for us.
Okay. Before I continue with this, actually, I would like to ask something about this. I would like to mention that unlike other podcasts or conversations or whatever we have here, where there's only two people speaking. Here we have a few other guests who are watching us and listening to us. And I would like, and though they can't speak, but they can definitely ask questions in the chat. So I would like to invite everyone who is present that if you have any questions, just type in the question, and I'm going to take care, and I'm going to ask those questions here as well. So here already we have the first questions from the audience is, have you considered other languages?
Yeah, so I definitely considered other languages. The default for me was to use C++. Um, I have a lot of good things to say about C++. So I'm definitely not a hater of the language. I think so much of the existing infrastructure of the software world was built on top of C++. But yeah, I think the three reasons that I mentioned were pushed us towards Rust. But yeah.
Okay. I'm actually especially interested in the third one that you mentioned of the type of people. I think that was the third one.
Yeah.
So can you describe or how would you describe this type, or how do they differ from, I don't know, others?
Yeah, so any generalization is wrong, right? So there are it's hard to categorize people for sure. But what we've seen is that when people are curious about Rust, they're usually just curious people. They hear about a new technology and they want to understand it better and they want to try it out and they want to explore it. And we're a company, fundamentally, what we do, like if we zoom out, is we look at it as like receiving high level instructions from our customers. Like this is what I want to achieve with my data. And then under the hood, we might use different engines, different technologies, different techniques. Um, so we have a very broad stack in terms of things that we need to understand and support. So we really want people who are curious about new technology and want to adopt different and interesting technologies. Yeah.
Okay, so there's another question here, which is actually jumping a little bit ahead, asking about Flarion and Git on GitHub, which it was sort of planned to be that I ask later on whether any part of Flarion is open source, and if yes, then where is it? Where can
Yeah,
people
so excellent question. We're huge fans of open source, and we also build on top of open source. We don't currently have a public repository. We do a lot of contributions, particularly to projects like Data Fusion and Arrow. So that's mostly our involvement in open source. That like we're heavy users of existing technologies, and we're able to push them to the limit and find interesting bugs, edge cases, etc. And yeah, and unpack them, debug them, and issue pull requests. So we have quite a bit of those in the open
yeah.
source ecosystem.
If you already started to go in this direction, then I have a few more questions because I mean you mentioned two major projects that you rely on, major open source projects, but I guess you have tens or maybe hundreds of Rust crates that you use.
Yes.
And if you think about all the hierarchy, that maybe thousands. And I'm really interested in how do you deal with all the dependencies, all the problems that come with the dependencies.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a good solution to this. Like one of the challenges with Rust, which isn't necessarily unique to Rust, but it's very you can feel it very strongly when you're building a big Rust project, is uh, the number of crates grows quite rapidly. You start with like 50, and then you're at 150. It's only you're at 500. So yeah, definitely lots of dependencies. We invest in the CI infrastructure so that the build is as fast as possible. We we're constantly maintaining the whole build setup in order for it to be as quick as possible. Sometimes that also means using like powerful servers. But I don't think there's a silver bullet here in terms of
what I'm interested in is how do you select crates? How do you make sure that they are, how much can you invest in, or how much do you invest in verifying that they are secure enough, that they performant enough, and how do you deal with bugs or any issues in these crates?
yeah. So if we encounter we're quite picky. So if something is small enough, then we won't take a crate, but actually implement it. But in terms of bugs and reliability, so that's the thing that I think we invest more than anything else. In terms of just like we really have tons and tons of tests to make sure that reliability is really as close as possible to 100%. Um, and that also is the case when we introduce new crates. Like we have uh, a very expansive suite of testing for that. In terms of security, that's mostly a matter of reputation. Like we don't choose crates that we think will do a bad job for us or that are shady. We look at like number of downloads, are people using this in the ecosystem, stuff like that. Um, yeah, I think that's mostly it.
Have you considered or tried, or do you think that there is a need of financing, sponsoring certain open source developers who are unrelated to your company, who maintain these packages, or bug bounties or things like this?
Yeah, I completely. I think companies like us should definitely invest in these kinds of things. We haven't yet detected like the right projects in terms of the ones that we're actually heavily using and in need of these resources because we're pretty in the mainstream, like lots of Apache stuff, like lots of stuff uh, that already has a lot of investment. But yeah, if we encounter something that we can contribute to or even contribute financially, definitely something that we'd consider. Like we want the ecosystem to be sustainable.
Okay, so I think we can go back to the mainstream of this conversation, but actually there are questions here that sort of related to this, which let me read it because that's easier. Also, could you please elaborate a bit more on the nature of Rust in your use case? What do you mainly do with Rust? Do you use async Rust? That's a
Yeah, so
question.
great question. The nature of our use of Rust is we use Rust basically in all of the data processing that we do. The way our system works is that we connect to existing infrastructure. So it can be something like written in Scala, for instance, Apache Spark, or in Python, some of the Ray infrastructure. And once we pass on the responsibility of the data processing from the high level language to Rust, we do everything in Rust. We use JNI when it's a Java virtual machine, and Python. We also use the relevant bindings to pass from Python to Rust, and then it's basically Rust all the way until we have to give back some sort of result, and then send it back.
So besides Rust, what other languages do you use for
Yeah, so
programming?
we
You
we use
mentioned
this.
Python, and but I don't know if you're using actually, or just somehow
We're,
connecting to.
we're still mostly connecting. Like we're using Scala and Python, Scala more than Python, because of its use in JVM environments. Um, and but whenever we can implement something that requires performance, we do it in Rust, and that's most of what we do requires a pretty significant performance investment.
Okay. So we can now circle back to the beginning of the company and how Rust was introduced to the company and how and how you find new employees. I mean, this was a startup company, so there was no one there. So it's not like a company where you have to start teaching people Rust or so it's totally your decision if you are bringing in people with Rust experience or without and then teaching them. How was that process? What kind of people arrived? Were they already experienced in Rust?
Yeah, so most of the people we hired are experienced in Rust. They have sometimes that means just generally like as a hobby have built things in Rust. There's some crypto aspect because of the success of Solana as a blockchain, so that spurred a lot of Rust development. So we have a bit from there. And there are a few people who don't really have a Rust background, but are strong C++ developers. And there we were able to, um, there it's more of an investment. As a startup, we don't do a lot of training, but if someone in our interview process shows potential and is able to learn Rust relatively quickly, then we also consider those people. And we have a few of those. I'll say that we try, just as a philosophy, not to push Rust to the limit. In terms of performance, we push it to the limit. In terms of uh, uh, low-level implementations, and we push it to the limit. But we don't try to be too sophisticated or too clever with the language. That's kind of my experience with C++ as well. That like it's possible to be very smart and very clever, but sometimes that makes the code harder to maintain. So if one of you took a look at our code base, you'd see that it's mostly straightforward. And when we're doing something that's elaborate, it's usually because that was the last resort. And that's kind of my philosophy, regardless of Rust, but especially in Rust, because you can do a lot of very sophisticated stuff.
Mhm. Can you elaborate a bit more? What are these things that you feel that are too sophisticated or that you would like to that you're avoiding in this case?
Yeah, so I think um, I mean, not all of these are necessarily sophisticated, but they add complexity. So when it comes to handling channels, async, things in that area, um, sometimes you have to use it. But if you can be like single core, running very powerfully and achieving your goals, then we prefer that when it's possible. So that's kind of the things that we're looking for. So anything that's like, I mean, this is the way in computer science generally, right? Like once you introduce concurrency of various forms, then things become much more complicated. So when we can avoid that, we avoid it.
Right. So there was a question here that I'm not sure that too relevant to you, but maybe you have some input on this. So how easy for you to recruit developers? Our company is mostly C++ and Python. And when I introduced Rust code into the Python group for performance, I saw a lot of resistance from the developers. So I know that it's probably not really, you haven't probably encountered this, but
I actually have some relevant experience because I've interviewed a lot of people with C++ background, and I think there's a divergence. There are people uh, who really love C++, who really appreciate what it's able to bring to the table, and they don't want to switch to another language. And when we encounter those in our recruiting process, then we don't try to convince them because they love what we're doing and we're not doing what they're doing, and that's great. And that really, I think when you're in an existing company and you want to introduce Rust, I think actually uh, the Linux kernel did a great job in this regard when they're saying like you don't really want to migrate to Rust because you rarely want to just migrate to anything basically in the software world. You want to gradually add functionality, show value, see that you're able to provide better developer experience, improved velocity. and then you can encourage people to move on. But I think so. If you're starting a new project, this is also what we're seeing in the data processing world. So if a company is using Apache Spark and you say, oh no, you should use Ray or you should use DuckDB, usually it's a tough sell because they're using a certain technology and they like that technology and they're proficient in that technology. And it's much easier to say, okay, we're like in this new team that's building a new technology from scratch. We can try something new. And I found throughout my experience, and that's much easier than moving a system from one technology to another. Um, yeah, that's also the case. Like regardless of Rust and C++, like Java, Go, like Golang, all of that stuff. Like there are tons of examples in that regard.
Mhm. The people who are so you recruited a number of people who basically didn't know Rust but were interested in Rust as well, right? And
Mm-hmm.
what was their learning process or learning resources that you might recommend to everyone else?
Um, I think first of all, the standard Rust book is a good book. There's a lot of good stuff there. I think I read it cover to cover, like online, obviously. But I think when you want to get acquainted with Rust and what it has to offer, then that's a good thing to use. Um, I think when you're in learning mode and you want to understand things, then AI is quite useful. Like saying like, hey, I know how to write this in C++. Like, how would you write this in Rust? And then you say like, explain to me this decoration, explain why it's not compiling, stuff like that. Um, like AI has its issues and its challenges and its hallucinations. But when you're asking it like basic questions of like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm trying to achieve, this is how I know how to do it in Python, C++, what have you, then I found that to be very effective. And I do very much believe that it's easier to learn a programming language by doing. So like reading a book is great, but you only internalize things when you try to build, and the compiler is mad at you, and it's like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that either. You can't do that either. And Rust, in that sense, is very annoying. It's a strict boss, but the result is good. The result is one in which you can really rely on the accuracy and the reliability of the result. I think that's kind of a a switch that people need to do when they're moving to Rust and when they're trying out Rust. That like the compilation is hard. Like getting things to compile is oftentimes the hard part. Then when things run, they usually run accurately. So that's what we tell people who are starting to learn, who are trying things out. Yeah.
Yeah, so I do a lot of training, and my experience is that it's nice to explain things to people, but they actually really learn when they do the practice and when they get feedback for whatever they did. And well, in Rust, the compiler gives a lot of feedback, so I have less work, but still the human feedback is nice when you might already solve the problem, but there are better ways to write in the given language.
Yeah, 100%. I also say I think that once you're in a Rust team, which not everyone is in, and it's kind of a privilege, then more junior members just ask a lot of questions, and our senior members like to share and mentor. So sometimes you're like, why is this happening? And people just explain like, this is the philosophy behind how this works. So once you have some sort of a core of a team that's able to provide these insights, then continuously growing it becomes easier.
Yeah. A nice part about this actually is that it's not just the juniors who learn from such interaction, but also the more experienced people who encounter interesting uh, code snippets from the juniors, and then they have to think about why why that person wrote that kind of code, and what's the story behind it. So I think it's in bi-directional the learning there.
Yeah, I think that's true about mentoring in general. Like as a mentor, as a professor, as a teacher, you learn a lot from your students. I feel the same way as a manager.
Okay, so there is a question here, which is actually very close to what I wanted to ask, but let's ask this one first. So, do you have any suggestion for someone who would like to find work in Rust, well, C, and other things, and is comfortable with them, but only has web dev experience career-wise? Career-wise, the transition seems borderline impossible.
Yeah, so I understand the sentiment of the comment. It's definitely not easy because companies look at your background, and if your background doesn't seem related to what you're looking for, I mean, the inconvenient truth is that it's just hard to break through. It's hard to say like, oh yeah, this is what I previously did, but now I want to do something new. And I think the the main solution to this, and it's not a convenient one because it requires work, but that's why it's powerful, is open source, is contributions. Because like we have people that we interviewed for the company, like we pursued them, like we reached out to them that we never met. We don't know what else they did in the world. We just saw the kinds of contributions that they were able to make to interesting projects, and we said like, this is the kind of person we want in the team. And we didn't know that they were like they could be web devs, they could be Python, they could be I don't know what I honestly don't know what they're doing in their day job. But if you see people, if they have like it's kind of in that sense like art. So if someone shows you their art and the art is beautiful, then you say like, okay, I don't really care about the rest. I would like that someone on the team, and it's not easy because you have to invest and you have to like learn these environments, etc. You gain a lot from that, but you have to invest a lot of that. So yeah, not the fast route or the easy route, but one that I think is effective.
Yeah, so I'm afraid that you already answered my next question, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. So I assume that as a startup you're growing, so you're looking for more people. So if I wanted to join your company in the next months two or so, so I don't have too much time. But let's assume I have some background that is relevant to you. What would you suggest to make it easier for me to make it easier for me to find you or you to find me okay, whatever, right? I think you understand the question. I hope.
Yeah. So first of all, the easiest answer.
To improve my chances, actually, I think that should be the question. So what should I do to improve my chances that you actually find me or employ me and so on?
Yeah. So it's a great question. The easiest answer is first of all to apply. That's the first step, and we do look at applications that we get. I think given a certain application, you have to like our interview process. We work very hard for our interview process to be very similar to the work itself. I found that at like big tech, most of the interviews are kind of IQ tests, and it's not a bad thing. Like these companies, like they optimize for getting just very smart people, and obviously they're doing very well with that. But for us, we want people who like during the interview really understand how their day to day is going to look like, and they like it. They see like they do the interview task that we give them, and they say, okay, these are the kinds of things that I want to do in the future. And sometimes people look at them and they don't. Like they realize that they don't want to work on I don't know, low level optimization database. So what I would encourage, like our website Flarion.io, you can see the kinds of technologies that we're using, which is like Polars, Data Fusion, Arrow, stuff like that. So if you engage with these projects and look at them and think how to use them, you don't even have to contribute to the open source. You can think like, okay, how do I use something like Polars uh, in data processing? Like how does that work? And if you're able to answer that question and share your experience and stuff like that, then you're already ahead of like 90% of the people who who have no context, don't know how any of these things work. So oftentimes putting in the work uh, puts you pretty much ahead.
Right. Um, Okay. The next sort of the question of the expansion of this question would be, which is slightly, I feel, strange with this question because it sort of assumes a little bit of moving ahead or back in time. So a little bit of time travel. But what would you suggest to someone if the person has 1 or 2 years, so decides that okay, I have no clue about Rust and all of this stuff, but I know your company and I really would like to work at your company. So I'm going to start to learn things and do things. So in a year or two, I have a much better chances to get hired by Flarion. Obviously, you don't know what Flarion will look like in 2 years, but
Yeah, of course.
so that's why it's a little bit a tricky question. On the other hand, you could think about it. What would you have suggested 2 years ago or a year ago for someone like this to be hired now?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting question. To me, the answer is if you're looking at like the medium and long term, I think the my advice would just to be more ambitious. Like if you're saying like I for the next year or the next 2 years, I'm going to work on this technology, then you can really achieve a whole lot in that time, even as a side project. So I would try to do something that excites me. Like 99% of the things that people work on, they just churn. They start working on it and they enjoy it for a while and then they stop working for some reason. And that's true for myself also. Like that just happens. Like you start working on something and then life happens and you have a lot of other things to do. But if you're committed for a long time frame, then you can really achieve a lot. Uh, and I would just try to choose something ambitious, like try to understand something, try to change something, try to do something like that.
Mhm. Okay, yeah. I thought about some specific types of projects to work on. Or
So some people like if we talk about specific projects, like some people work on, for instance, the game engines in Rust. If you're interested in gaming, there's this kind of joke that everybody wants to build a game engine in Rust, but nobody wants to build a game. Um, and so I don't think that's necessarily bad, but like these are the kinds of things like if you're excited about gaming, try to build a game engine. If you're excited about AI, then try to see like what's relevant in AI with Rust. I don't know if there's that much. But if you're excited about data, then you can look at these big data projects. Like there are quite a few at this point, big Rust projects online. And then I look at like the top 15, 20 Rust projects on GitHub and say like, what excites me here? What's interesting? Like, what would I want to build? What would I want to recreate? What would I want to benchmark or test or stuff like that? And that also brings you connections. Like if you like, one of the things that I learned throughout my career is that when you reach out to successful people that are technical and you engage with what they're working on, like the response rate is huge. It's like I don't know, maybe 90% or something. Like people like that people are excited about their technology and want to build on it. Um, so finding those things that you actually want to engage with and actually engage in, uh, I think is a great investment.
um, yeah, that's an excellent point. Um, I try to recommend people all the time to invest in open source, doing things in open source, but it's always people get excited, but they most of the people actually don't follow through this, and they do a little bit and then they abandon it, the whole thing. So those who do continue, I guess they will stand out
Yeah,
in
I think
this
that's
world.
exactly right. I think because of the churn and because most people don't go deep. So if you're able to go deep and commit to something, then again you're ahead of like 90% of people already.
Mhm. So there's a comment here that for those, a good start is trying to help in an existing open source project. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think helping is
Existing open source project or create your own?
I wouldn't try to create my own as a start, but I think even before helping, even just using an open source project, like there's a huge one of the things that we're seeing at Flarion is that there's a huge variability in terms of what the open source project is able to do. Like some projects, especially in their core, they're super robust. They work. They you just plug and play. And others like they can be hard to use. They have rough edges of various sorts. and being a user and understanding like where does this technology really work well? Where does it not work well? Like, why doesn't it work well? These are the kinds of things that you don't even have to start by like. Sometimes people are intimidated by contributing because like maybe people won't like what I contributed, or maybe I'll have a back and forth with some maintainer for days and I won't get anything through. But just like starting with using and gaining insights and opening issues and saying like, hey, I saw this. Is this okay? Is this expected? Um, Again, these are the kinds of things that people just don't do. It sounds simple. It is simple. Like it's not hard to choose a product and try to engage with it, but most people just don't do that.
Yeah, so a lot of this work is not very difficult, but time consuming.
It's time consuming. It's an investment. There's no going around that. That's why it's valuable in a sense. Like in the cryptocurrency world, there's a concept of proof of work that you like show that you invested the time in something. And I think that's applicable to many aspects of life. So if you invest that work, yeah, I think it has value.
Okay. So, how do you evaluate the decision that you used Rust? What did you that you use your Rust? Yeah. So,
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a piercing question, I'd say, because it's hard to evaluate, right? You made such a big decision, and now you have to decide, like, see if it's a good decision. I haven't regretted it yet. Like, I haven't seen a point where I say, like, oh man, why did we use this technology? That was a huge mistake. We also have the very significant benefit of starting from scratch. So when you start from scratch, you don't have any legacy. Before the conversation, we talked about migrating code
all right.
to Rust. So we don't really do that. Like we rewrite some things, and when you rewrite, then you're just like starting from scratch. So a lot of the pains of moving from one technology to another, we just skipped. It's much easier to start from scratch. So I think it's too early to say. For now, like no regrets at this point. We'll see. Uh, we'll see.
Okay. What are the parts of Rust that or crates or like the whole package that you find exceptional good for you or in general? And what are the areas where the Rust world could improve, where it's something that hurts you?
Yeah, so I'll start with the positive. I think Rust in the past, say 5 years, has really matured in an impressive way. Like you see, we engage with customers using all sorts of technologies, whether it's data lake technologies or data processing or storage and stuff like that. And there's usually a crate for that, like the echoing the Apple's. There's an app for that. So usually there's a crate for that. Usually someone built something pretty good that's able to use this technology um, and uh, and help work with it. Um, so that's something that I think is very good. I also think that the reliability is real. Like we did something that where we were integrating like Scala code and Rust code, and suddenly there was like a memory corruption, and someone on our team was like, "Oh, a memory corruption! I haven't seen one of those in years." um, so that was like a moment of okay, yeah, this Rust thing is working. I'd say the two negatives that I can think of is one, build time. Uh, there really is like it's a pain. Like building Rust pretty quickly becomes uh, pretty time consuming, and it's hard to optimize. Like when I worked in C++, there were all sorts of tricks to make the build run faster. Even though I also encountered many situations where we had a very long build. Um, but yeah, that's a pain. And another one is I'd say the flip side of there's a crate for that, but there's a lot of support. Is that there's a lot of vaporware, I'd say. There are like crates that you use them and you're like, oh, okay, this crate, like, it doesn't really work. And that's fine. I mean, nobody's selling you that crate. It's just something that someone published online, but you realize that you have to prune it. You have to make decisions. You have to make sure that this relates to your previous question, Gabor, about uh, like how do you choose the right crate? So you have to choose. You have to make sure that you're using something that you can believe in.
Mhm. For a second, returning to the earlier conversation, earlier part of the conversation, we have another question here. follow-up to finding work as a web dev? Any suggestions for types of repos, types of projects that would be appreciated by employers if you contribute to, in your opinion, of course, I am contributing to programming languages, for example. I guess the person means compilers. What do you mean, programming languages?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely good. Like working on these kinds of technologies, it's not easy. It's something that someone like that does differentiate you. But I will say that it's valuable to be able to like currently this is changing, but currently there's still a limited number of companies that are hiring for Rust roles, and the number is growing. But it's different if you're coming to a company like AWS, which does a lot of Rust, or a company like Flarion that does a lot of Rust, just because like there are different use cases. So at AWS, or Google or something like that, you'll spend a lot more time on concurrency because that's just like there's a lot of input output happening inside their systems and a lot of microservices. So if I were interested in a role in one of those companies, I'd probably try to understand, like they have blog posts, they write interesting stuff about their challenges. I try to understand a bit their stack and gain relevant experience there. If we're talking about a company like Flarion, then it's a different stack. So there are many islands in the Rust world, and I try to like I think compilers are a great place to start. And if you find a company building a compiler in Rust, then obviously that's fantastic. But if you're looking at a company that's not doing exactly that, then I would try getting acquainted with the tech stack that they're using.
Actually, to this point, I sort of partially dreaming about companies that would say to their candidates that, okay, here are a couple of issues open in an open project, and your homework or home assignment for the interview process is to deal with those issues, and maybe not even directly related to the company. So to see how the person interacts with open source projects and without and contributing to the world, sort of.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'd also add that the big advantage of engaging with projects that are related to the company is that you get a better understanding if you want to work there. This touches on what I mentioned earlier. Like sometimes
Right.
you might think that you want to work there, but then you look at like the stack, what they're building, and you say, that's not really my thing. And the best time, this is what I tell candidates as well. The best time to understand that is like before you join the company, because yeah, it's really important to find the right fit.
So here we have a very technical question, or more technical than what we had so far. High performance data processing is what you are. That's, I think, the statement. Fly
Yep.
around inside. I don't know where this sentence comes from. So could you share any valuable practical examples or tricks how you debug distributed and high performance use cases? Do you use Tokyo for development, or just something like wrappers around Arrow, data fusion, and so on? Any other valuable recommendations?
Yeah, it's a big question. First of all, I mentioned this, but I'll mention it again because it's just so important. Like tests across the stack matter a whole lot, and this varies across companies. Because if you're building I have some experience like with like a front end development, and there I don't know if I'd invest a huge amount of my time in tests. You mostly want to iterate and see that it works and find bugs and solve them. But when you're building a mission critical software, which is what we're doing, you really want things to be exact. Like some startups can move fast and break things. At Flarion, we don't move fast and break things. We try to move as fast as possible, but it really needs to be stable. So this means integration tests, system tests, unit tests. These are the kinds of things that are very useful to debug even distributed and high performance systems. Because even a distributed system eventually includes various components and interactions between those components. And if you test those well, then you reduce the number of cases. That said, our team finds itself running something for 3 hours on 2 terabytes of data in order to find all sorts of edge cases. And there, I think, first of all, it's not something that we've solved, I'd say. We're working hard on building tooling that extracts data from the data processing pipeline and visualizes it in a way that's easy to understand, so that you understand like how much memory you're using, how much CPU, like why is it happening, how much disk. And interestingly, this is something that is also going to be valuable for our customers. So like we make data processing much more efficient, much faster, much more performant. But by doing that, we also want to visualize this to our customers. So in a sense, we want to visualize it to ourselves to understand what the bottlenecks are, and then visualize it to our customers. This is a hard thing to do. So I won't say we've solved it, but I'd say adding a lot of debugging. We use also a Tracy, actually, as a tool to find performance issues, and it's quite effective. So when you're able to attach things to your code, and they do all sorts of performance monitoring of various sorts and benchmarking, we found that to be valuable, especially when debugging performance issues.
So the next question that's coming from the audience is actually the next question I wanted to ask. So I'm going to ask the way I thought about sort of is that to try to understand what is your experience using AI tools to write Rust code, which tool you might be using, which model.
Yeah, so first of all, I'll say we're model agnostic at Flarion. I found that the AI is similar to IDEs and even operating systems. People have their preferences, and as a manager, I'm not gonna push someone to use a certain flavor of AI because I have a preference for it. Like I trust the team members to try to be as effective and efficient as possible, and we bring people that like are trustworthy in that regard. I've had good experience with Claude. I think it's good for software development. Some team members really like ChatGPT. Some like DeepSeek. They found especially R1 to be effective. I'll say that the things that the AI is best at in terms of our development is first of all, needle in a haystack issues, where you have like this huge error and you say like, hey, AI, like what do you think is going on here? And then it's like, oh, you wrote this incorrectly and you should fix it. And usually that's just right. Like you take a blob of code, you take the error, 9 out of 10 times it says like this is probably there and it's right. Basic functionality is good, but usually that doesn't save that much money. I think the metric Sam Altman has said this, and I 100% agree. I think the metric of like percent of code written by AI is what in startup world they call a vanity metric, which is like it sounds interesting, but it doesn't really tell you how much you're using, because like autocomplete, like how much of my text that I write in emails is written by autocomplete? Probably a lot, but like how significant is that to my process? And not too much. I will say that where AI isn't as good is when things get complex. And that happens a lot for us. If you're trying to write something very performant, if you're trying to write something that's distributed and different things impact each other, whether it's memory, CPU, disk usage, networking, once many parameters get into the equation, usually the AI focuses on some local minimum and not on like the whole system. And we found it to be very difficult to get it to solve those kinds of problems, which is kind of fun because like you want to be working on things that are not like the AI has trouble with, because otherwise, I mean, I don't know, you can just get the AI to do them. So
Let's switch a little bit to a slightly different audience. The audience that part of the people who are here, I guess they're part of that group. If if you're talking to other startup founders or CTOs or so manager level people or co-founders, what would you recommend them? How to decide whether to use Rust or not to use Rust? Um, how do
Yeah,
you
so
evaluate? How should they evaluate it? Or,
so the place I'd start is you want to have some familiarity with it. You want to champion. I think that's true with any new technology. You don't want to like if you have a an engineer with 3 years of experience and they say like, "Hey, Rust is exciting. I want to bring this to the company." You're unlikely to be successful by doing that. But if you have someone who can experiment, who can mentor, who can make decisions on the right projects for this technology, then I think you're much more likely to be successful. And I mentioned this earlier, but I'll mention it again because I really think it's crucial. Is choosing the right projects is super, super important. So if you have like a contained project that you know what you want to achieve there, and you're starting from scratch, and you want to do that with Rust, and you have the know-how, then I don't see why it shouldn't succeed. Like it's very much set up for success. But the more the project is uh, distanced from that situation, I think the less likely it is that that it'll be a success.
okay. I am, I think, mostly at the end of my questions. I don't know if the audience have more questions, the audience who's here, or if you have subjects that you would like to bring up that I didn't ask because I didn't think about it that important, and you think it would be important for people to know about the company, about the use of Rust, how to apply for a job at your company.
Yeah, so how to apply it's pretty easy. Like we have LinkedIn posts at our company, so you can look at LinkedIn at Flarion and see probably the most relevant here is the low level developer, which is how we call our Rust position. Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting momentum in the Rust world, lots of talent. I think the fact that big tech is investing in Rust is really significant because it just creates a whole set of people who are being trained and using the Rust in production and also contributing to open source projects. So I think that's great. And yeah, lots of exciting stuff here. We're in terms of Flarion, so we're like the world of data is so vast, and there's so much to do here, and so many engines and technologies that can be applied when a company wants to do data processing very efficiently. So we're obviously excited about that future, and we think that Rust has an important role there.
Actually, I just thought about a new question. What are the
Okay.
main problems that Flarion is facing that your engineers will need to solve in the foreseeable future that the new people who are joining the team might need to work on?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd say our engineers are pretty fortunate to have pretty tough challenges. Um, so in many senses, we're building a distributed database for data processing, and that means handling issues of very significant scale, of disk usage, of memory management. Um, these are the kinds of things that we're excited about. Like how much CPU is this using? How much memory? Is this designed correctly? Should we redesign this part of the code? Should we sometimes we insert many fast paths into our code so that um, when a customer is using it naively, we can get a big performance boost. So lots of challenges in that area. It's like CPU, memory, large scale of data, and performance. Those are the kinds of things that we encounter basically every day. And we also encounter a lot of like new and interesting technologies because our customers have a lot of new and interesting technologies, and we have to learn about them, support them, etc.
actually, who are your customers, or what type of companies are your customers, or could be your customers?
Yeah, so our customers are mostly the enterprise, meaning companies that have very significant data infrastructure, because they're the ones that care the most about performance. So if the company has hundreds or thousands of data processing jobs, whether it's Spark or Ray or Hadoop or Trino, these are the kinds of companies that really care about performance, that really have pains in terms of managing their Spark, their data infrastructure in general. And they're the ones that are most excited about what Flarion brings to the table.
Okay. Probably that shouldn't have been the last question, but so if somehow this is how it turned out.
It's
Anyway,
okay.
I don't see any more questions from the audience. Any final words for this meeting podcast?
No, I appreciate this conversation. Thanks everyone for joining and asking interesting questions. And yeah, thank you, Gabor, for organizing.
Thank you very much, and I really enjoyed it. And if you're watching this as a video, then please like the video. And if you're listening to on the podcast, then in the show notes there are going to be links where you can find the company and the other things that we discussed. And thank you thank you, Ran, to be here, and everyone else who joined us and asked questions that were enhanced, I think, the whole conversation. And thank you everyone for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you.